One of the most underappreciated aspects about Christina Aguilera is her commitment to never doing the same thing twice. Each of her albums and eras have their own distinct identities, some may be a little weaker than others, but overall, it's clear she enjoys crafting new worlds and aesthetics with her projects. Her 2006 album, Back to Basics, is arguably the best example of this. Not only was it a sonic departure from her previous album, Stripped, but it also marked a major reinvention for Christina's public image. During the Stripped era, Christina caused controversy with her racier outfits and performances, which came as a result of her bolder alter ego, X-Tina. For Back to Basics, X-Tina was replaced by a new alter ego, Baby Jane, who was named after the classic 1962 film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. This alter ego was inspired by old Hollywood legends, such as Marlene Dietrich and Greta Garbo, and Christina pulls off this look effortlessly. Her style from the time was given class and sophistication, while still retaining the sexiness and boldness Christina's known for. It's crazy how in just 4 years, she went from risque, and literally dirty outfits, to something so drastically different, but that just goes to show her versatility as an artist. She rocked all her looks from the Stripped era, and she rocked all her looks during the Back to Basics era, despite being such a 180 style-wise. For the album itself, Christina set out to pay homage to the legends who came before her, specifically artists from the 1920s through the 1950s, such as Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, and one of her all-time favorite artists, Etta James, who she actually sang a tribute for at her funeral in 2012. Christina has a deep-rooted love for music from this era, going all the way back to her childhood, when her mother and grandmother used to take her shopping for old vinyls, and wanted to replicate and update that old-school jazz and soul sound. To do this, she collabed with hip-hop and R&B producers, such as DJ Premier, Rich Harrison, and Mark Ronson, who helped bring her vision to life. She also asked producer Scott Storch to help, since he had produced several songs on Stripped, but he refused to participate, since Christina wouldn't pay for a private plane to fly him and his crew from Miami to LA. Christina, being the messy queen that she is, dedicated a song on the album to him, called FUSS. You could probably determine what that acronym stands for. Scott did not take kindly to the diss, saying the album was full of fillers and lame Vegas-like cabaret music. Needless to say, we haven't heard a Scott and Christina collab ever since. Aside from the diss track, Back to Basics is mostly an album about love, based on a relationship with then-husband Jordan Bradman. The album is separated into 2 discs, with the first one being a blend of contemporary hip-hop and R&B with old-school jazz and R&B, while the second disc is more stripped back and vintage-sounding, and was almost entirely co-written and produced by Linda Perry, who penned and produced Christina's signature 2002 hit, Beautiful. While both discs share the throwback sound she was going for, the first is definitely more of a modern take, while the second commits even harder to the old-school inspiration, truly sounding like something that would have came out in the early to mid-1900s, and comprising almost entirely of live recordings. I will say, personally, I do prefer the first disc, since it has more energy, sticky hooks, and catchy melodies, while the second disc is much more intimate, and I have to be in the right mood to want to listen to it. If I had to sum up the general vibes, I'd say the first disc has the songs you could party to, while the second disc is something that's best enjoyed on your own, at home with a glass of wine. Christina kicked off the era in June 2006 with the lead single Ain't No Other Man, which peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, and has gone on to become one of her signature songs. 18 years later, this song still goes as hard as it did when it first came out. The blaring horns, fast tempo, and Christina's powerhouse vocals make it work both as a party track and as a loving tribute to old-school jazz and R&B. Just the first 10 seconds alone are instantly recognizable, even to people who don't listen to Christina, and it remains a radio staple to this day. In contrast, the second single, Hurt, was a heartbreaking ballad about the loss of a loved one, inspired by the death of songwriter Linda Perry's father. Hurt is one of Christina's rawest and most devastating ballads. You could genuinely hear the pain in her voice as she contemplates what she'd do and say if the person she was singing about was still here. It's a tearjerker, definitely one I listen to if I need a good cry. The next single, Candyman, picked things back up, sounding like a continuation of Ain't No Other Man, only this time with clear inspiration from the Andrews Sisters' 1941 hit Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, which she also paid homage to in the video, appearing as a trio of herself singing for her army men. The song may sound like it's from the 40s, but I don't think the lyrics would have flown back then. Somehow the old Hollywood wartime pastiche covers up how dirty the lyrics are, and it's awesome that Christina wasn't holding back on the naughtiness just because she was doing a throwback record. She even recorded a song whose title I can't say on YouTube, but you could probably fill in the blanks here. It didn't end up on the album, which is probably for the better since Back to Basics isn't really a super explicit record. The most sexual song aside from Candyman is Nasty Naughty Boy, a sensual jazz tune about the things she's gonna do with her man in the bedroom. It also has a cute little nod to Lady Marmalade in the second verse, which she of course did her own version of with Pink, Little Kim, and Maya back in 2001. There's a few references to her past in other songs like Still Dirty, where she proudly proclaims she's still a freak even with her image change, and the final song on Disc 1, Thank You, Dedication to Fans, which samples her debut single Genie in a Bottle, as well as including voicemails from her fans. It's actually really touching, and I'm very jealous of everyone who got featured. If my voice was in a Christina album, I would not shut up about that until I died, and even then, I'd probably still brag about it as a ghost. The Genie in a Bottle sample was a great callback, but it's far from the only one on the album, as this one is stuffed with samples from artists such as B.B. King, Gladys Knight, Claude Bolling, and Betty Harris. You can really sense Christina's passion, knowledge, and admiration for classic soul and R&B with all these samples, and it's impressive how she, and everyone who worked on the album, were able to create something so heavily steeped in that time period, while also sounding fresh and modern. There are some bops on here that are among my favorite Christina songs, such as the infectious Back in the Day, the piano-driven On Our Way, the funky Mark Ronson-produced Slow Down Baby, the uplifting ballad Without You, and the fierce Here to Stay, which is such a quintessential Xtina bad bitch anthem. The biggest highlight for me is probably the second track, Makes Me Wanna Pray, a gospel-infused stomper featuring Steve Winwood. This song is so hype. She takes you all the way to heaven on it. It's just impossible to not move and scream along to whenever I play it. Back to Basics may be full of bangers, but there's also some deeply personal cuts that you could tell meant a lot to Christina. The most obvious example being Oh Mother, which was released as a single in Europe. The track discusses her abusive childhood, and how she and her mother suffered from domestic violence at the hands of her father. It's one of Christina's most touching songs in my opinion, as well as one of her best in terms of storytelling. She succinctly details her parents' relationship and how it went south, and it really makes you feel for what she and her family went through. Moments like this, along with the tributes to old Hollywood, jazz, soul, and R&B legends, make Back to Basics uniquely Christina. Despite the drastic change in sound and aesthetics, the album retains her brash, bold, empowered, and glamorous personality. No one else could sing this record and bring what she brings to it, and that exemplifies why she's one of my all-time favorite artists. With almost all of her projects, you feel her passion, and she commits 110% to whatever themes and concepts she's taking on. She truly gives distinct eras and crafts entire worlds for her projects, and it's just great when you could tell an artist has that creative drive. As someone who doesn't even listen to the kind of music this album is paying homage to, I still love it because it's unmistakably Christina. Other artists weren't really doing albums like this at the time that committed so hard to being an old school throwback. The only other one I could think of is Beyonce's B-Day, which was also released in 2006, though that album is more inspired by R&B, funk, and dance music from the 60s and 70s. Other than that, Back to Basics sticks out like a sore thumb among other releases from the time, but it's still an essential piece of 2000s pop culture. Everything from the videos, performances, and her looks have made this era iconic, and it truly did cement that Christina was here to stay. If you've never heard it in full, definitely give it a listen. Like I said before, I was never into older music like that, but I still enjoyed this record top to bottom. I actually didn't listen to it for a long time because I thought it was going to be too throwbacky and quote-unquote old sounding, which I know is silly and really stupid to say, I get it, but I was younger and dumber, okay? Give me a break. When I finally did listen to all of it back in 2018, I was so upset that I ignored it for so long, and since then, I've only grown to love it even more. Back to Basics is a phenomenal record, and proves why Christina is a true artist in every sense of the word.